Hello, everyone. This is UnSpun with your host, Joe Atwill and Jan Irvin. This is episode 57.
56.
I'm sorry, 56. I stand corrected. And I haven't even finished the introduction. Now, today is Valentine's Day, and so we're going to be discussing basically relationships in the brave new world. In other words, given the planned destruction of the family and the mind of the individuals in Western civilization that they have all been subjected to by the secret society that has slithered into the financial and political positions of power, relationships, family production, just day-to-day living is tough. And so Valentine's Day is a really good moment because it reminds people of the value of basically romantic type relationships and of what those things can mean. That we would cover this in a general sense and maybe give some personal anecdotes and also some suggestions as to how to get along in the society and how to make it better. I have just returned from Fiji, where I was able to participate in and observe another culture. And it's always quite interesting going to non-Western civilization countries because you can see that happiness really is possible. Community is something that can be beneficial, not something you're alienated from and afraid of. And it's just interesting, to get that kind of perspective. However, Fiji has a lot of problems in that it is still suffering from the Masonic treachery experienced in the colonial period when it was enslaved by Britain. They shattered the Fijian hunting-gathering culture. I think that's an honest description of it, which had some rough edges, cannibalism being one of them, but nevertheless was something that they had created. It was their world. The Brits came in, they enslaved them. They didn't really make very good slaves. The Fijians were a little too likely to strike back, and so they replaced them in 1880 with a class of indentured servants from India. They were from more or less typically from the untouchable classes. They brought them there under this indentured servant contract. Told the Fijians they didn't have to do any more plantation slave labor. And over about a 30-year period, they brought in over 60,000, mostly males from the Raj, from British India. And then following World War II, the Brits just left, and then Fiji was simply cut adrift. And then you had this bifurcation because the Indians, the ones from the untouchable classes, had all taken advantage of what education was possible, whereas the Fijians were very alienated from this. And so when the Brits left, you had a situation where this new population, the Indians, were the ones that had all of the skill set to run a bureaucracy. And so you started to have vast differences in economic success. And this led to a series of coups where the Fijians basically cut out the Indian population from political power, but at the same time they weren't themselves, the Fijian people weren't really ready to take on the mantle of the bureaucracy. And so now the country is in this weird state where the Indians have no political power but are really the group that runs the bureaucracies and financial side of things. And so hopefully Fiji can resolve this. I talked to a number of people about this issue and everyone seems optimistic, but I think there is a real chance for them to succeed because they are not really subjected to mind control. I mean, Fox News doesn't play around the clock, CNN isn't there, BBC, they just they are on their own. And so
don't give them any ideas, Joe.
Right. Yeah, I know. So I think that they really are on the right path, because the people will try basically to find a way to have the best possible harmony. And you can see it, Jan, in the relationships, in the street. You can see the families. You can see the little kids that are able to play freely, and roughhouse and go off into places. They're not subjected to the paranoia that exists in our fragmented and alienated and atomized culture. So it was really quite interesting. And I was thinking about Valentine's Day while I was there, because I knew I'd be back on Valentine's Day, and I knew that in our culture, we have a much more difficult time in establishing relationships. I talked to a couple of very young Fijian couples, and I was interested into how they basically saw the beginning of the relationships and where they saw it going, and their vision of it was just so calm, and the vision of the future was so just uncomplicated. They were going to live together. They were going to have a family. They were going to raise kids. There really wasn't any hysteria that they had to deal with. And I thought, gosh, that is so different than the people I know who are in relationship formations and family formations in America. And we've talked so many times about the atomization of the individual and families, but we haven't spoken that much. We've done a couple shows where we've covered it to some extent, but I was wondering about your understanding of this problem that people state that have in relationship formation in what I call the brave new world dating system, because everyone is so damaged. Everyone has so much of the cultural influence that is coming from the secret society and the weaponized anthropology to make it hard for us to start up relationships, right? In other words, we're literally swimming upstream all the time. So give us an update on your life and what you're experiencing in this culture. But before we do that, before we segue in, I wanted to ask everyone, I wanted to mention that at the beginning of the show that we need donations for the network, for Jan, for myself. We can't do this on our own. And so,
let's give out the website.
Yeah, why don't you give out your website information?
Mine's gnosticmedia.com, GNOSTIC media.com. Joe's is CaesarsMessiah.com. And please donate to both of us. Also donate to the network. We're going to try to mention this at the start of the shows instead of the end from now on, because we're always rushing right at the last second to pull all of this stuff in, and it gets kind of absurd. So
right, yeah, and so that's something that's important. So anyway, it's I was get back to this. I just was wondering, have you had any new insights as far as what are the problems people are facing out there?
Well, geez, man. Well, here's the thing, Joe, and I think I've probably talked about my private life once ever in 8 years of doing shows. I think it was UnSpun episode 4 or something like that. And, let's see, since then, today's Valentine's Day. So last Valentine's, I actually had gotten engaged. And then that fell apart over spring and summertime. We were originally supposed to be married in June, early July. That all fell apart. And, one thing I'm really good at, Joe, is failed relationships. I got to say, I mean, you've been married for 50,000 years or something like that, right?
It only seems like that to my wife. It's only been 33 years. It's sort of like, yeah, this is the Masonic, kind of pyramid.
And I've hung out with you and your wife, and you two are pretty, at least from the outside perspective, you two seem like two little peas in a pod. Well, she's a little pea, you're the big pea.
We're calm.
But, kudos to you for making it. I mean, I've wanted to run my own family and relationships show for a couple of years, but the problem is I haven't found anyone to have a relationship with, to be able to do a family and relationship show with. I mean, I suppose Lennon Honor has tackled this issue well out of San Diego, and he's really exposed a lot of this and tried to fight for some of this. And I suppose we've done, 4 shows here on UnSpun regarding family and relationships, and they've all been really successful, and probably the shows we've had the most feedback out of, interestingly. And, I don't know, I can offer plenty of feedback from the perspective of what not to do. It's kind of like, who's that guy? Was it John Gray? Right. Men are from Mars, Venus, women are from Venus. He's had so many failed marriages. He's now a relationship expert. It's kind of like that or something. It's like, well, I've screwed up so many times, so here's what not to do. But yeah, it's
well, one of the
really it's really sorry, it's really difficult because everybody in our culture has these ideals, or by the time they figure out what's going on, they're in their 30s or 40s, and it's too late to try to, or almost too late to piece things together. And then you're in a hurry. It's, I'm going to be 46 in the next while. I don't want to say when, but, and it's like, I do have a son. I've had a couple of failed marriages. I was married for 7 years and 3 years. And, it's like at 46, you don't really expect yourself to be, single, just running your business, doing your thing. It's definitely, in my experience in life, nicer to have someone to share things with, etc. But, it's like, Valentine's Day, what a better day to discuss and have a conversation about this stuff for all of us who aren't out on a date, and for all of you poor suckers sitting at home alone tonight watching our show.
Yeah.
So, where do we go? Where do we take it? Thanks, Aldous Huxley, for your Brave New World, and all the CIA and everybody for all the destruction and havoc you've caused. And, we're just trying to undo that damage one mind at a time, and let people know that there are others like you out there. I suppose the biggest thing that I've learned throughout the years, and this has been something that's hit me really recently, is not allowing pain that former relationships have caused you, not to allow that pain into your present, and to just, keep it out, keep those negative people out, and attempt to take responsibility for how you feel today about yourself, and just being, I hate to use a rammed ass Dick Alpert term, be here now, to explain things. But that's kind of where probably the only valid place where Dick Alpert's work actually applies to anything, is just, a value is just trying to maintain yourself. And when you do fail, trying to understand what went wrong, trying not to repeat that mistake in the future. Trying to just deal with life and relationships as best you know how, in a damaged world. And like I guess it was episode 4, damaged goods. We're all damaged goods. How do we take the next step from there so that we can get into a valid, viable relationship like these Fijians? Who just see, hey, there's no issues, there's no this, there's no that. It's just you and me, and let's have a family, and we already know what our future is. How do we get past all of the damage and destruction without feeling like, for instance, a victim, and to be able to push forward through it and to rebuild from that?
Right. I noticed in Fiji that the relationships, one of the reasons why they're so easy to have is that the culture contained them. In other words, the culture just anticipated relationships in the sense that everyone around them basically was also establishing relationships, or to a large fraction, and so the concept of a permanent relationship, of a family, of children, was something that wasn't contested. It was just assumed unconsciously as something that was a positive and was the direction that the people headed into. And of course, there's no financial anxiety in Fiji, and that was one thing I really could see. I could really see the reason that they had made us poorer. If you look at 1950, a male with an average job can afford to have a wife who stays at home and children and own a home. I mean, now you need to be, Ivy League graduates with, financial degrees to be able to buy a house before you're 30. And of course, you need private school money for the kids. And so you've got to be making, just this incredible salary in order to even to anticipate any success in these areas. Whereas in Fiji, they don't have any food security because the natural world provides it. And land for the Fijian is just tribal. So they're able to basically establish a resident, pretty much wherever they want or as they see fit. But in our culture, we have the anxiety. And so one of the components of the modern world that I think people need to be aware of and support one another when you start the relationship is that there's going to be money trouble. I mean, that's just almost a given. So when you enter a relationship, you have to remember that it isn't something that's going to be easy financially. It's something that both parties, the man and the woman, will need to have a plan regarding. And moreover, you need to kind of develop, I hate to use the expression, but a sense of humor and an acceptance of the anxiety. I mean, as long as the Federal Reserve is in existence, you can be sure that the vast majority of the population will have money problems. In the United States, I was reading a statistic, and it doesn't come clear to mind at this moment, but I'm pretty sure it was that more than 60% of Americans have less than $5,000 in savings. Okay, so in other words, the large fraction of Americans have no savings. Now, this is a world based on debt. You have to have credit and savings in order to buy a residence. So the old classic formation of home ownership, choosing an area where you can basically raise kids. I mean, these things are very, very difficult to achieve in the Federal Reserve countries, and all of the countries where they're all central banks that are controlled by the secret societies. So this is something that when you enter, and we say what I'm trying to do, Jan, is to point out that if you have awareness of the situation, instead of letting that make it worse because you now go, oh my God, I'm up against this horrible, system, and it's all designed to stop me from being able to create a family. The hope here is that awareness of it will be something that can be useful in the relationship to kind of reduce tension.
Absolutely. Well,
that's the hope, is that when we go through these things, we're not trying to read a litany of, our agonies or the great problems that are keeping these things from happening, the family point. We're trying to say, look, have awareness of them as a tool that you can use to try to help one another, right, to move forward with family production. And one really valuable insight that helps is to know that when you create a family, you're really doing a revolutionary political act. You're really doing the one thing that is most threatening to the oligarchs. When you create a family and have children, you are doing the most, and it's not just that it is correct politically to basically rebel in this fashion from the brave new world fascism, but you're also connecting to the parts of yourself that are most real, because we are social animals, and you want to establish a social
Well,
circumstance.
it comes down to, when you're old and dying, do you want to have your wife and children and grandchildren all around her, or do you want to be all alone sitting in a, socialist home somewhere with nobody there, essentially? But, I do want to comment here really quickly. We did have a couple comments in the chat room. Someone said, how about us married suckers too, sitting here watching the show? So sorry, I didn't mean to exclude married people, but at least you're probably sitting here watching it. You're sitting there watching it together, or maybe, who knows? Kathy says, the challenge is that the past will often affect you in that the words create emotions that run the body. The ability to engage the prefrontal cortex is inhibited. It's like the patterns take over, and then you experience the same experience over and over again. And then unwittingly or unconsciously, people, and she's going into abuse here, people who are abused draw similar situations to themselves, and the feelings that come up in a paradoxical way, the feeling is safe, meaning that you learned as a baby child to not feel safe, to feel, so feeling unsafe actually feels safe. So it's like,
Feels normal. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels normal. The way to shift the experience is to engage the body, heart, and brain, our minds. It is about tolerating what seems absolutely horrible and untenable, because the feeling takes us out of the time and space continuum. So, it's like, let's say you experienced abuse as a child. Like, in my family, abuse was pretty standard issue. If you did something wrong, you didn't get just spanked, you got whipped, And so it's like, what Kathy is saying is that when you go into a relationship, are you pulling the anxiety from when you were beat as a child or from some experience from a bad relationship into the present? And it's like, the body takes over, and adrenaline takes over, cortisol takes over. And, it's like suddenly you get Tourette's or something, and you can't act the way that you really want to, or that you feel like you should. It's like the anxiety of the failed relationship in the past actually takes over your ability to function in the present, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And, the thing is, it isn't just this, really overt trauma. I mean, think of someone who's a young male, say 21 years old, who's had 30,000 hours of pornography watching.
Oh.
I mean, how is that individual going to date successfully or have a courtship procedure? Because his ability to have a kind of, a sexual relationship that is spontaneous, that is something that is, exchanged between the two of them, and is, as they move into it, is going to be very difficult, because his understanding of sex is coming through the pornographic world. And so he's been programmed in a bad way. So it's, and pornography is not the only one of these things. I mean, just think of all the way that marriage is ridiculed in the media and relationships.
Well, and look at, Steinem and Glassman and all the rest of it.
And then look at
proud of abortions and stuff, which is an attack on family.
Yeah, and they've also weaponized homosexuality, where they promote it so much that they create sexual confusion in, I think, both males and females, that they take it out to the largest extent they can, so that you even have, you don't have the clear-cut sexual attraction that could start the relationships that would begin family come to mind automatically any longer, because people have just been subjected to just so much, weaponized media, where feminism, the woman is separate and alienated from males. The male is a pornography watcher. And of course, both are being subjected to the, GBLT XYZ world, where they're just being told that heterosexuality is maybe, an okay idea, but maybe not. So these things are all being brought into the relationship. And this is where I think insight can help, because if people recognize that is a design package. I mean, it's a package, and it was designed basically to stop the individuals from going forward and starting relationships. And so once you have that insight, I think it is possible to bring that knowledge to another person and say, look, here we are. I have attraction to you. I think we have the basis of a relationship, and I want to have a relationship. However, here's the situation. This is the reality we're facing. This is what's been, we've been subjected to. And hopefully this will give, compassion and insights that will, let people move forward with a little more resolution. Because I really think that, even though it's just, it's kind of funny because here we are on Valentine's Day, right? And, that is like the, the heart and kisses and chocolate kind of side of relationship. It's all this giddy stuff. And we're talking about this other side, this resolution, which is just like, oh my God, it seems like it's so unpleasant, But, the honest thing is, Jan, that the relationships that have resolution and that have the grit, of like a personality just saying, damn it, I know the relationship is the right goal and I'm going to go down the path and do what I need to do. Those relationships will not only last, but are a lot more satisfactory. And actually, I think from that structure, you're going to have a lot more fun eventually. The Kim Kardashian, chocolates, pornography, and champagne kind of thing. I mean, believe me, that isn't even real enough to be a good sitcom. So that's why we want the even though it sounds kind of like, oh my God, it just seems so, why would anyone want to do this? Look, you've got to start out with resolution. I think, Jan, I'm curious to know your opinion on this. Is it a good idea at the beginning of relationships, in your opinion, to talk about with the partner, to bring up the idea that, look, we're under attack, and in order to survive the attack, we need to have resolution? Is that a conversation that is actually possible and appropriate to have at the beginning of relationships?
I'm not sure. I've tried it both ways. Well,
yeah.
Don't misconstrue that. And I haven't been successful.
I didn't.
I haven't been successful in either way. As you were talking, I just posted a comment on Facebook and I said, rebel, ! In today's world, the most rebellious act you can do is have a family, not flash your tits and have an abortion or get tattoos and piercings.
Right. I mean, exactly. It's just like in the Coen Brothers film, what was it?
For Old Men, something or other.
Where they, they're gloating over the fact that they've destroyed Western civilization, and he goes, God, can you believe it? The kids have bones through their noses. And then he says signs and wonders, which shows you that the Coen Brothers understand the religious domination and religious destructive aspect of the weaponization.
Right.
That's
well, let me just read that, Joe, because
sure.
We have it at the end of our article that you and I co-wrote together, Manufacturing the Deadhead, a Product of Social Engineering. And it's No Country for Old Men. Quote, Ellis, if you'd have told me 20 years ago I'd see children walking in the streets of our Texas towns with green hair, bones in their noses, I just flat out wouldn't have believed you. Bell, Signs and Wonders, Ellis. But I think once you quit hearing sir and ma'am, the rest is soon to follow. Bell, oh, it's the tide. Ellis, yeah, the dismal tide. It's not the one thing. Bell, not the one thing. So this just goes to show how it's this massive multi-pronged attack. You break down manners. We don't address each other as sir and ma'am. We don't have politeness. We don't respect our elders. We think that, the latest fad is the greatest. And what do old people have to offer but 90 years of experience, right? They're just stupid. They don't know anything because, they're not great with your iPod. And, so if we take a step back and look at it, my grandparents were married for, 59 or 60 years before my grandfather died. And they were, my experience with my grandparents was they were holdy handy, kissy smoochy right up to the last day. I mean, every time you saw them, they were always holding hands, always kissing, always going out on dates together, and so my grandparents actually left me a really good impression of what a proper relationship should be. And at least as far as, from coming in as a grandchild. Now, I can't say what my parents or aunts and uncles went through growing up as they were in their 20s and 30s growing up, from, World War II and all of that, but, or in World War II. But, there's a stark contrast. And anyway, I don't know where I'm going.
But I know that's interesting. And look, every individual is different. However, the general trend is very clear. Your grandparents came from a culture that promoted relationships. We live in the pornographic, weaponized culture that is designed to not let them start. Heterosexual, kinds of relationships. So the people who are now starting these relationships, hopefully the information that we try to give them in the show about, the weaponized culture that they're facing will actually make it more possible for them to go through the difficult times that are almost certain in this situation we find ourselves in. I was, just going to point out, like that Coen brother quote. I mean, the expression "signs and wonders" is biblical. It's just, it exists in the New Testament, and I think the character's name is Ellis or Eli for a purpose.
Ellis,
the Coen brothers are just the most vicious Masonic individual. We should probably do some shows on trying to decode their stuff, but I just find it so sickening. I can't force myself to watch their stuff. Anyway, so we want to be in a world, I think, and I'm hoping, I'm pretty positive, we want to be in a world where there's lots of families. We don't want to be in a brave new world where the government is creating, individuals to work inside of a mechanical system, right?
Inside the Moloch machine.
The Moloch machine, right? Inside the Moloch machine. And so, when you read Huxley's book and he talks about the epsilon and delta classes doing servile work and not rebelling and enjoying it, and then you look at the skyrocketing rate of autism in our culture, you're really seeing real time the creation of the epsilon and delta class. And I just wanted to mention something about that, because this is important in relationships too, is sort of understanding the health of your children. Is that when you have like an increase in autism from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 50, you're not just shifting down the bottom of the bell curve and having, like more autistic kids at the far end. You're shifting the whole bell curve over. So to the same extent that there are more autistic kids, there are also less brilliant kids.
Sure, absolutely. And here's the thing, Joe, is, all these medical experts have been, quote unquote, fighting against this while giving us MMR vaccines and the rest of this stuff. And I had Rima Lebo on the show a couple of years ago discussing this and the Western analog of the Hindu caste system and recreating all of this. And by the way, she had sent me a message the other day that General Stubblebine has died.
Yeah, I was sorry to hear that. Yeah.
But it's all of this, brave new world stuff. And it's like the obesity and heart disease issue. It's all this fork tongue double, what's Orwell's term? Double speak. It's like we're trying to make you healthier. You should eat less fat, less cholesterol, less meat, more grains, more, sugars, more soda pop, more McDonald's. And meanwhile, everyone across the board who has listened to this advice has gotten sicker and sicker and sicker. Yeah. Folks, if you haven't figured out that the number one cause of disease is wheat and grains and your low fat, low HDL cholesterol diet, you need to wake up and realize that. It's just like, these people increasing, like Joe said, autism from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 50, And I know people here in town with children with autism, and I have friends with autism, and I have a good friend, April Bowden, whose son, she has a show exposing autism and all of this stuff, and her son has suffered autism horrifically as well, and he was fine up until the age of 2 or 3 when she took him to get a damn vaccine. And they want to try to tell us, we have to pay attention to the science. Trump is anti-science because he commented against vaccines. Well, the science shows, and in fact, wasn't it just Jamaica or some other country this week that just released a study that showed it was the vaccines increasing autism? And the science does show that it is vaccines. It is the MMR vaccine. It is mercury, that they use in the study.
It's everything.
I did interview Dr. Andrew Wakefield years ago. I have read his whole case report. I have gone through all the research. Richard Horton at the Lancet, I hope that I haven't followed up in recent years, but I hope Andrew Wakefield sued the shit out of him, because Richard Horton at the Lancet lied and slandered and covered all of that up for the British government and for Aldous Huxley's Brave New World crap. But what we're seeing today is the outcome of all of this stuff, with the destruction of our minds, with the destruction of our sovereignty, with the destruction of even our right to defend ourselves, with the destruction as men of our masculinity and even being able to provide and protect as males and families, and, women's femininity, and now they're trying to attack bi-culture. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's not bi-culture. It's not bi nature. It's like all of this transgender nonsense. And I want to do a show called Trans Agenda on just this, because what they're doing is trying to make it out like you're not born as a male and female, that somebody actually assigned your gender to you, which is complete nonsense. Life happens because there are male and female forces. The combination of male and female coming together creates life in the image of ourselves, or God, essentially, which, you could consider almost the combination of the male and female energies coming together as God itself. And then when we back away from that for a second, we can see that all of these attacks on family are just the antithesis of this, the promotion of Satanism, of transgender and homosexuality, from Steinem and Singer and Mead and Bateson and all the rest of these people. We can see that they are exactly attacking this idea. So if the male and female are the core of creation, and that invisible connection that is between them is essentially what we identify as God, then when we step back, we can see that Satanism is attacking that, and then all of the extended family that comes from that, and then trying to, using science to create homosexuals where Steve and Steve have kids, or Eve and Eve have kids, etc., which isn't natural and possible at all without scientific intervention to do any of this stuff. And at what cost are any of these things advances at all? Are we as a society getting any better at all? Just like we haven't gotten any better from their claims of trying to solve autism or trying to solve obesity or heart disease, while telling us to eat the very things that cause it.
Right, or cancer.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so this information is really important for people who are in the beginning stages of family production. You really need to know how they're going to attack your kid. That's an important whole chapter of information that people need to really do. This is
exactly why we need a whole show dedicated to family and relationships, to warn people of exactly the stuff.
Yeah, you've got to do this research.
This is the CIA's agenda. This is the Tavistock Institute's agenda. This is the Frankfurt School, the AJC's agenda. Here's what you can do to stay out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And, as a parent, you have the responsibility to do the research. You really do have the responsibility to do research to understand the real statistics about what the government is wanting to put into your kid's body. The weaponized, food, the glyphosate, the GMOs, and of course, understanding vaccines, I think is critical. And then, as Jan pointed out, just understanding just diet in a general sense to try to get the kid the most natural power for healthy growth, for development that you possibly can. Once you know you're fighting against a program, it's a lot easier to defend the child. I didn't know this when I was bringing up my kids, and I really wish I did, because I would have done a lot of things differently. We were fortunate, we didn't have any real terrible situations in my family, but many of my friends did, particularly autism and emotional issues that I think were related to diet and vaccine and other, weaponized components. But I have seen families with children with autism. I have a couple of really good friends who have this circumstance, and your heart goes out to them. And once that event occurs, you're really going to find life difficult. It doesn't matter about your financial or even how strong the relationship is. It's just a very, very hard road, because there's someone who you just love in such a profound way, and they're just not going to be able to develop normally, no matter what you do, because the damage has been done. So this is a really important part of modern relationship production, is the awareness. The parents have to develop the awareness of how to defend the kid against the weaponized culture, weaponized medicine.
Right. There's another thing that I want to do is bring up is, how do we deal with people who actually think they're benefiting society by not having children and by not having a family? And what happens is we get into this whole issue again of extended adolescence. You can't really understand as men what provide and protect means until you have a children, because when you become a parent and then again as a grandparent and a great-grandparent, you reach a whole new level of understanding in life. And in my opinion, as a parent, my adolescence stopped the second my son came out of his mother's womb, because you have that big aha moment. Life is no longer about me. It's about this life that I've created. And then you will do anything to take care of and protect and provide for that life. And of course, this is what the oligarchs and the CIA and the Tavistock Institute and SRI, et cetera, want to label as patriotism or, patriotic behavior. And it's not, and the irony is the CIA and all of their psychopathology, as well as SRI and Tavistock and the rest of these psychopathic groups that we've exposed over the last year or so, is that, as they've promoted this blatantly, excuse the term, Satanist agenda against families and relationships and meaningful life building, is that, if we go back to the 1930s when Huxley wrote Brave New World, were there 7 billion people on this planet or about 1 billion? And so, what the CIA did to encourage eugenics and to cut off the lower classes to get them to breed out was to promote hypersexualization. Along with that, all of the pedophilia and the homosexuality and the transgender and all of this stuff that they blatantly promote. I mean, you can't even watch a stupid TV show anymore these days without transgender gay agenda being thrown in your face. You watch a show and it's like you might see this stuff out in public once in a while, but let's say if you watch a series of a TV show, they'll flash it in your face as like, every other person is of this type of behavior. But what the CIA has done, if they were trying to limit global population, promoting sex, drugs, and rock and roll has created the exact opposite effect. Now we just have the overpopulation without the family, which of course they can more easily control. But it's had the exact opposite effect, because I think families within themselves tend to often be self-limiting in their size based on the immediate resources available. And so now what you do is you have these single mothers who think, oh, well, I can just take a pill. I can go have sex whenever I want to. It doesn't matter anymore. And then they think, oh, well, I'm not, and I can just get checks from the state to take care of this kid. So then this behavior perpetuates. So now we have single moms with 6 kids, for instance, with 3 or 4 different baby daddies. And so with all of this eugenics and dysgenics and CIA horseshit, has there been any real gains, or has everything that the CIA has done been a total loss as to the intended outcome of their sick and twisted agenda? And I would suggest that while, yeah, they've mind controlled us and screwed us all, in the larger picture of the eugenics agenda, they've failed miserably.
Well, I mean, the basic plan, as I see it, was, well, and it depends where you want to pick it up, but as we've experienced it, I think the most easy thing to understand was that they wanted to derationize or deracinate, the ethnic Europeans.
Well,
So
definitely, yeah, they definitely wanted
so
to.
the first thing they did was they got rid of, Polish neighborhoods, Irish neighborhoods, German neighborhoods. So,
Sure, and wasn't it Michael, what's his name, that wrote a book on cities exposing all that?
Yeah, right. So what you ended up with was the great white middle class. So already you've lost a component of strength. And then from there, you had sex, drugs, rock and roll, and feminism. So now you started to, the great white middle class started to be basically blended down. The whole idea was that they wanted to produce a smaller and smaller fraction of intellectually powerful and ethnically coherent families, and to produce a larger and larger fraction of atomized individuals, so that you'd get the fraction of the population that was coming from families as opposed to single women would be ever diminishing. Because you see, the single mom is in a very, very difficult circumstance, and she will naturally defend socialism, in other words, more government power, because that has always been the way that's been set up as a way that they call it the safety net. But if you look at what it was in terms of the African American family, and shows we've done, we pointed this out, it was actually just a weaponized way to break apart the progress that the culture was making. And so that when now we're in a situation where, just in terms of the so-called democracy, you have this very, very large fraction of the population coming from the socialist creation structure, the single mom. Now these individuals who've been born through that process have always known nothing but state support. So they're going to always be looking to the government, not,
right. And always blaming men for keeping them down somehow.
Well, the woman
out entirely.
Right. And the male on the other side is given pornography.
Right.
So you have the state for the single mom, pornography for the male. And this is all leading to the Brave New World, where the people are basically being chemically dumbed down, so they aren't even aware of where they're headed, in terms of culture. So really, if you stand back from it and you look at like where we were like in 1900, say before Bernays began his part of the project, if you look at that culture, that European culture in the United States in 1900, and then see where we are now, the idea that Huxley's vision of a genetically stratified culture controlled by government is really pretty obvious, pretty simple to see the progress when you actually lay the components as you go through time side by side and compare one to the next. You can see that, look, we're definitely becoming more and more obedient and dependent upon the state. I mean, that's obviously. We're definitely been broken down ethnically. There's not going to be any ethnic pride to stand in the way of any of this process. And we're definitely getting dumbed down, so that we're not going to be able to even complain about being a Delta
and the millennials, I mean, you can't even have a logical conversation with this new group of university educated people because they need their safe zones and their diapers to even have a conversation with them.
Well, they've just been conditioned from the very beginning. I mean, basically they're from the GBTL XYZ culture,
Yeah.
where everyone needs to basically have their own safe space around them to protect them, and the safe space have to be basically, provided by the government. So, this is stuff that on Valentine's Day, couples who are in the romantic phase of the relationship and have decided to spend a date listening to Jan and Joe talk on UnSpun.
Sorry to all of you who did that.
I mean, this has really got to be one of the best dates in history. What I can say is that awareness of these problems and awareness of the how necessary resolution and grit is, even though it may not, it's not chocolate, it's not not pornography. It's the work of a consciousness that wants to really develop as fully as you can, and you will find that the person with you in this date, if they can agree and understand some of these insights, that you're really taking a great step toward the production of a real family. And that's an achievement that we talked about earlier, is a political triumph. And it's something you can really be proud of. And once you have that, once you're down the road a little bit, hey, see if you can find another family that feels the same way. Maybe we can create an ethnic neighborhood. I mean, let's see what we can do to reverse the weaponized program that we have been attacked by.
Couldn't agree with you more, Joe. And people that are figuring this stuff out need to find each other and work together and create support groups and networks that are outside the government, and Parent 1 and Parent 2, and people that want to go back to calling parents mother and father as they naturally are and as the only way it can be. I don't care if you have a surrogate mother or whatever, some sperm donor, there's still a mother and a father, and that's how it is. And we
need to promote the natural
order.
The natural order, because remember that all of the things that we're experiencing, and including, we've done shows on this, including the increase in homosexual populations. And look, people, Jan and I are not bigots. We're really not opposed to.
Let me just show this on screen, Joe. I have this document for the Jaffe memo from Planned Parenthood, and I'm just going to share this on screen here so people can see that this is the agenda, President Population Council, Planned Parenthood. And, Planned Parenthood wants to shout all these women out there, oh, Planned Parenthood's for the women. They're giving medical services for women. This is complete nonsense. From day one, Planned Parenthood has always been about eugenics. And we can see here, postpone average marriage. They've done that. Extended adolescence and arrested development. Alter the image of the ideal family size. They've definitely done that. Compulsory education of children. They've done that. Encourage increased homosexuality. They've done that. Educate for family limitation. They've done that. And meanwhile, mind you, while they're claiming that population is 7 billion, I've never checked world population statistics and verified it. And from what I can tell, if everybody's having one child instead of 3 or 4, population is on a massive decline, as other researchers have exposed. Russia has begged families.
I'd like to do a show exposing I'd like to do a show exposing this whole population bomb.
Yeah, me too. I think it would be a good topic. But fertility control agents and water supply, they've probably done that. In fact, we know they have because of all the pills, including psych meds in the water. Encourage women to work. They did that. They gave women voting rights, not because women were suppressed as the official bullshit, They wanted women out of the family and out of the home and not taking children, and they wanted to tax them. No taxation without representation.
And Jan, these are all great points, and I'm really glad that you can bring this out. And I just wanted to point out something hidden, because as you sit there staring at your iPhone instead of into the eyes of your partner and your family, you should bear in mind that Bill Gates and the whole Microsoft component of this is something you can trace back a generation and see, just as you can with the original rock stars, and see just clear cut how obvious the program and the weaponization is, because the head of Planned Parenthood was Bill Gates's father.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Well,
okay. So then you can really see how this idea that they sell it as this kind of beneficial population control, but really it's just genocide with a happy face. And I wanted to mention that Gates yesterday was quoted as saying that nationalism is a threat, is a global threat. What he should have said is nationalism is a threat to globalism, and of course it is, because it's one of the components that has to be destroyed in order to create world government, which is really the whole
Joe,
program.
how long does it take us to find a Huxley when we get to Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, I mean,
and then Aldous Huxley created the term the pill. Here we have the psycho George Bernard Shaw, who said, if you can't justify your existence, we should kill you. But, I've thought for the last week since I saw that video of his, how would I justify George Bernard Shaw's existence? And other than a eugenicist and, pseudo-intellectual, I can't think of anything.
Well, this is the thing, Jan, is that these people are promoted by the media as not just coherent, but as brilliant thinkers, when the fact is they're just trying to put a happy face on our genocide.
Bill Gates is the happy face on genocide.
Exactly. And so when you see, all this, whenever you see population control, just to get that out of there and put the word genocide in, because that's really what it is. It's just a kind of warfare that's being waged against certain people by other groups that wants to find a happy face way of getting them off the planet so that they can own it themselves. And if you happen to be, a European, you're in big trouble because you're the target. So anyway, so the thing is that, here on Valentine's Day, we want to encourage romance and courtship, the old standbys. But unfortunately, in our modern world, we also want to point out that with that box of chocolate, you probably want to put the web address of Gnostic Media and CaesarsMessiah.com. Give that to your dates, because we can be useful as just general information that we've come across that I think might be valuable in the side of the relationship that's related to commitment and resolution. When you have the relationship, it's going to be rocky. Everyone is damaged. Everyone has, hair trigger tempers and becomes depressed, or brain chemicals are not right. We're going to need to use the understanding of the fact we've been attacked to support the resolution, the grit, the tenacity. That's what it's going to take to make these relationships bear fruit, to use expression.
This rebel comment I posted on Facebook kind of took off, and Joel just posted, the counterculture is rising. In other words, meaning us and family and taking all
right on, Joel.
Right on, Joel. Good call.
Yeah, absolutely. The counterculture is rising, and you know something? It's about time. We need to recognize we are a culture. It should be a counterculture. Instead of that, let's use the expression attacked culture. People understand we're attacked. We can defend ourselves. So this show is about trying to help people, have the information that we have as researchers into the nature of the attack, and to encourage them to do their own research. Folks, we're in a new world now, brand new world, where we are open sourced. Our information is not dogmatic. We're not here to try to convert people. We're here to begin the process of reason.
Right. We're here to sum it up in the last few seconds. We're here to say, fuck the brave new world.
Exactly. Exactly right, Jan. Anyway, so thanks a lot for the Valentine's Day discussion. And
Thank you, sir.
We'll be back next week.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and take care. Good night. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire: the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.